Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I think, unfortunately, a lot of us have to deal with too much of the time, and that is unhelpful comments about our child's anxiety or OCD, unsolicited suggestions. Those kind of things can really drain us. And I wanted to do an episode on how to respond to those unhelpful comments about your child's anxiety or OCD, because I think there is a big depends on that question. And I want to dive into what does it depend on and how do we respond to those things in order to preserve our own energy and our own will to continue focusing on our child with anxiety or OCD instead of letting other people drain us. But before we get started with that topic, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they are available in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is the right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. I am doing my free series, and it's starting this Thursday, July 25th, and I would love to have you come. This is a great topic because this is something that we focus on in the third video of this free series when we're talking about your support. So my free series that I do twice a year is called Self-Care for Parents Raising Kids with Anxiety or OCD. And I have two free series that I do twice a year. So I do 4 free series each year. And I purposely do 2 different topics. One is about you and the other one is about your child. And I feel like often we don't want to focus on ourselves. We feel like we're not a front burner issue. How is focusing on us going to help our child? And sometimes we can even tell ourselves stories like it's selfish to focus on me, or it's self-absorbed, or I need to focus on my child and give them everything. And really it's a balance, because if we don't work on there's a couple of things. One, if we don't work on ourselves, we actually can't show up for our child in the best way that we can. The more we work on ourselves, the best, I'm trying to think of my words. I'm recording this kind of late and now my brain's not working. But when I am good, I show up in a better way. That's what I'm trying to say. When I'm doing well, when I'm in a good mood, when I'm feeling hopeful, when I'm feeling recharged, guess what? My parenting, my coaching to my kids, my handling their discomfort, my handling their meltdowns is all better because I'm anchored. And so helping yourself is really helping your child. But we dive even deeper in this free series. We talk about your mindset, what stories you're telling yourself, what triggers are coming up for you when your child is struggling with anxiety or OCD. You're not a blank slate. You're bringing things to the table. We all are. And then we also talk about your physical, your emotional, your mental health. And then the last part of the series is talking about your support. And I give you ideas of how to develop a support system, even if you don't have one, or we do a checkup on your support system and we say, how's your support system? Are they actually really supportive? Let's look at this. Are there people that you can tap into who might be more supportive than the ones that are closest to you? So we spend a lot of time evaluating that. Join me. It is free, and you can join at any time while the series is running because they are 3 on-demand videos, and then I do 3 bonus live classes on the series website. And so you can participate in asking me questions and hearing things live. Join us at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. I look forward to seeing you over there. Today, we're going to dive into one component of that free series that we go deeper on, and that is, unhelpful people. So a couple of thoughts on this. One, I want you to know that you're not alone. And maybe you already know that, but a lot of you actually don't. We are all dealing with unhelpful comments, and they come in different categories, in my opinion. The first category, I'm a list maker, and so I put things in categories and lists. Obviously, there's gray areas, but I'm an organized list maker in my head, not compulsively, just like, in a way that actually calms me down. And I feel like there are people who make unhelpful comments because they're just ignorant. And so it's coming from ignorance, like, oh, I'm so OCD, or I wish my daughter was a little OCD. Ignorant comments, right? Not meant to incite you, not meant to judge you, just ignorant. That's one category. The next category is a judging comment. And this is, well, if that was my kid, I would blah, 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 right? Or, maybe you should do some family therapy. They're judgmental, criticizing comments. They can also come from a good place. They might be someone close to you who really wants the best for your kids and thinks that you're the problem, or your parenting's the problem, or this is the problem, or that is the problem, or if you could just do this, that would solve it. So it's coming from some sort of criticism. So we've got ignorance, we've got judgment and criticism. And then maybe the third category, and obviously these are not exhaustive, I'm just organizing my thoughts in my brain, would be the unsolicited advice column, right? So maybe they're not being judgy, they're not criticizing per se, maybe they're not fully ignorant, but you don't want their support. Or they're like, oh, has she been back to therapy? Or, oh, are you working on the exposures? Or, oh, and you're like, I don't need your pressure as well. So some areas, because when we're looking at how do we respond to unhelpful comments, we kind of want to say, first of all, who are they? Who and what? Why are they saying this? So who are they? Are they people that I will never meet again? I'll never see again? Are they people I'm going to have to see over and over again? Are they people that my child is going to have to deal with over and over again? So even if I don't see them, this is someone my child's going to interact with over and over again. So can they impact my child? Another question to ask yourself is, do they want to learn? Can I change their opinion in any way? Because we have a finite amount of energy, and that's even a more coveted commodity when you're raising a child with anxiety or OCD or any other medical or mental health condition. When we as parents are dealing with a scoop of other things on our platter, and that can also be other things outside of our children. Maybe we have aging or ill parents ourselves, or maybe we have a partner or spouse who's struggling in something, or maybe there are environmental stressors like finances or relationship issues, whatever. We have a lot on our plate, and one of those extras would be a child with anxiety or OCD, and we don't have energy to spend for nothing. I mean, that's how I look at it. I'm like, I am a single mom now. I hate saying that. That really bothers me. I'm almost more comfortable. Well, I am more comfortable with widow. That bothers me too, because it makes me sound like it feels like I'm saying I'm a victim, which is totally obviously not accurate. But widow sounds better than single mom to me, because anyway, that is not the topic of today's podcast. But I don't have an infinite amount of energy, and much more so now that I'm doing this solo. And I know a lot of you out there listening to me are doing this solo as well. I know I'm not alone in that. I'm not special in that, but that means we have to be even more coveted with our energy. And so I don't have the energy to get angry with you. I don't have the energy to try to educate you if you don't want to be educated. I have to ask myself, why did you say that? Is that worth my energy? And do I need to set a boundary? And that's going to really gauge my response, because I have had all sorts of people say things that were ignorant or were over the line. Well, I'll give you some examples, and I'm sure you have a lot of your own, unfortunately. My daughter, I was in a 504 plan meeting. And for those of you that are out of the United States, a 504 plan meeting is like 504 plan are like special accommodations in the school environment. And a lot of people with anxiety and OCD have 504 plans because we also have something called IEPs, which is much more educational. Like, my child's having reading issues or they're academically struggling. With a 504, they could be getting straight A's, but they need accommodations based on their anxiety or OCD or any other medical or mental health condition. And so I'm in this 504 meeting, and my daughter's teacher actually says in a jokey way about something, "Oh, I'm so OCD about that." We're in a 504 meeting for her OCD, Now, I could have gotten offended. I could have educated. I know my daughter has told me in the past that her teacher makes these comments. Now, she does have another teacher who makes these comments in a really vicious, hurtful sort of way to lots of kids, and that's different. That needed to be addressed, and that needed to be people need to become aware of that because that's different. This was a teacher who was really kind-hearted and wanted the best for her students, but she was like a million other people who make those kind of comments and don't understand fully what OCD really is. I mean, she was in a 504 meeting. She knew what the parameters were as far as what my daughter needed, but it wasn't a time where I felt like I was going to educate. And I felt like that would just be shaming her. And I don't think it would really change because I feel like she's made these comments before. And it's really just part of her vernacular. And I know there are a lot of parents out there who feel like anytime someone says, "I'm so OCD," they want to educate. And there's no right or wrong here. And I feel like we have to be compassionate with each other. I feel like some of us have energy for things and some of us don't. And that is okay. We all do our part in what we can. And so that wasn't where I was going to spend my energy. I've actually had mental health professionals that have been colleagues or friends say, "I'm a little OCD about that," and use it incorrectly. And that wasn't something I was going to educate them about, because if I was to call them out on it, they'd be like, "Oh, I know what OCD is. I was just kidding. It's just a joke, blah, blah, blah." And so that's different though when someone's making an unhelpful comment directly to you about your child's anxiety or OCD. And that still might be something that you let pass if you feel like it's not a fight worth having. Now, there are a lot of times where it is worth a discussion, especially if it's someone who is in your life on a daily basis, is constantly doing it, can impact your children, that kind of stuff. I had a family member say to me this past year that when they were with my child, their child didn't have any issues at all. And we were talking about something way, way in the past. So they were talking about when my child was very, very young. And they're like, "I remember that you were warning me about all these different things when you went away and we watched your child, and they didn't have any issues." And I think it's just how kids are better behaved for someone that's not their parent. Well, I was livid in my brain. Could you imagine? I mean, my child had severe issues. This wasn't like my child behaved better for you than me. She was probably uncomfortable, and so she did certain things so that she could mask better while she was with you for the weekend. But it was not a comment that was malicious. And this was a family member who I see maybe once a year. And so it wasn't worth me getting my feathers ruffled for it, not because I'm being gracious to them per se, but I'm being protective of my energy. Is this something that I want to get angry about? And it's not something I want to get angry about, because they aren't treating my child in a negative way. They're talking about something from the past, and I see them once a year, and it wasn't mean-spirited. So I'm telling you these stories as examples because I want you to try to do a little snapshot assessment in the moment and say, ask yourself these questions. Is this a person that's worth wasting my energy on? Now, wasting might be actually a pretty insightful word. So maybe wasting, I shouldn't say wasting, because it's not wasting if it's really important. But is this a person that is worth putting my energy into about this topic? I think that's better. My bad. Then, am I doing this to educate them? Am I doing this to change how they interact with my child or with myself? Or am I doing it out of anger? Because if I'm doing it out of anger, and I always tell my kids this, anger is a boomerang. we throw it at someone's head, but it really bounces back and it hits us. I don't want to expend the energy that anger is going to expend. If my purpose in confronting you and going through this is because I'm angry with you and I want to one-up you and I want to prove to you why you're wrong, that's actually just a waste of my energy. And at the end of the day, my kids are the ones that are going to suffer for that. And I don't want you taking away my energy from my kids because I have to put it on you. And that's my decision. Now, there are people that may require some sort of comment to or some correcting. So after the break, I'm going to talk about 3 different types of responses and how to choose which type of response you want to give that person. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. Okay, so there are lots of times where we do want to educate somebody. They might be constantly telling you that, you're not parenting your child in a certain way, or that you're coddling them, or if you were tougher with them. And maybe these are your parents, or maybe it's the school. Or worse yet, maybe it's the therapist, which I think is really bad when it's not actually happening. And so it might be someone that you want to address this with because they spend a lot of time with your kids, or they're meant to be helping you, or they're draining you and you can't escape them. There's a lot of people who drain us that we can't escape, and we might love them, but they might be draining. And this might even be a spouse. So it could be a spouse, it could be a sibling, your brother or your sister, it could be your parents, it could be your best friend, or someone in your friend group, it could be people from your church, it could be people from the school. Like I said, it could be your therapist, it could be the lady standing next to you in your checkout line, right? And you might want to expend some energy on that lady behind you in the checkout line, even though you're not going to see her again. It might make you feel good. It might energize you. For me, confrontation drains me. And so that's not going to be something I'm going to seek out, but it depends. So, okay, the 3 types of responses why did I say 3? There's 4. 4 4 response choices. Now, obviously, this is not exhaustive as well. This is just the way I organize things in my brain. So the first one would be maybe a witty response. If a person, and this has happened to me quite a lot, where people would make comments like trying to excuse my anxious child's behavior. Let me think of a couple of them. I feel like one time it happened in swim class where my daughter was really anxious to go in and had major anxiety about swimming in the pool and was coming in and out of the room. And I feel like this older person said something like, I know it's hard to be tough, something like that. There was like some judgment there. Like I wasn't being tough enough. It's, hard to be tough. And I could have said something like, oh, does your child have an acute anxiety disorder as well? Yeah. Or like, yeah, I know it's so tough when they have, a diagnosed anxiety disorder. It's really tough. It's tough when they're on medication. It's really tough when you have to go to therapy twice a week. I mean, do you have grandkids like that too? You can totally relate. So you could be sarcastic and witty. I know with my daughter, I've said stuff like, to her teachers. She had 2 out of her 3 teachers. No, she only had 2 teachers last year. She only had 2 teachers, and both of them used a lot of mental health conditions as like slang. The one I told you was like really mean, and she got in trouble quite a bunch because of that. But the other one would say, oh, I'm so OCD. And I said to my daughter, why don't you just say, oh, I'm sorry that you have OCD too. I know that could be a really debilitating condition. And she didn't want to do that, obviously. That was embarrassing for her. But I've worked with kids who will say things like that to their friends or to people in authority even. They'll say things like, oh, I didn't know you have obsessive compulsive disorder too. Those intrusive thoughts and those compulsions could be really tiring. And that tends to shut people down sometimes, unless they're being intentionally mean, which, we do have that as well. I think especially kids experience that where other kids are being mean and they're not going to really care if they're put in their place. Okay, so maybe you're a little bit wittier than me and you can think of better responses. I'm not really good at thinking of witty responses off the cuff. In the moment, I can sometimes think of them. But being witty is sometimes inviting conflict and confrontation. Obviously, you can tell that I do not like conflict because I'm always like, I wouldn't say anything. But that's part of my social anxiety. I have a really hard time putting people in their place for no reason. Like I do have a really vicious mama bear side of me that is really embarrassing, that will come out. And I will say, I won't be witty. I'll just be rude and I'll be confrontational. But normally that's when like I feel like I'm protecting my child. It's interesting how like we'll go to bat more sometimes for our kids than we will for ourselves. Okay, so number 1 out of 4, witty response. Number 2 is the educational response, educating them on why your child is doing that and what you're doing to address it. And so, for example, let's think of an example. Maybe if you have a relative or a friend who says, maybe you need to punish her for that. Actually, well, this is a bad example because it's something I said to my daughter about my son, where she was actually saying like, you should punish him for that. And I was like, you can't punish a behavior that is spontaneous and that they feel bad about as well. It's not going to really change the next time. Not going to be like, oh yeah, I got punished, so I should probably learn how to self-regulate. That's not going to happen. But you can educate. Like you go to someone's house. This happened to us a lot. I'd go to someone's house and my kids would, one of my children would have special food with them because they have RFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, and really would starve to death if they didn't have food. And so they might say something like, oh, we try to just have our kids eat whatever, they're served when they go places. Or, maybe they make some comment that is a little bit judgy. And then I might say, yeah, well, he actually almost was G-tubed. He's got restrictive eating and he's being followed by GI and by psychiatry because it's really severe. And he's afraid he's going to choke to the point where he can't eat. And so if I don't bring him food, he actually will literally starve to death. That's an educational, edgy response. But if let's say you have your children's grandparents, your parents, maybe you send them podcast episodes, or if it's your partner, because it can get really close, it doesn't have to be someone extended, maybe you send them podcast episodes or YouTube episodes. I do feel like people who are not wanting to dive into the resources but aren't resistant to learning will listen to a podcast episode, or they'll listen to a YouTube video that's like 5 minutes long. So maybe send them some of those that you listen to educate them and say, I know you're well-intentioned, and I know you're giving me all this like typical parenting advice, and I love you for caring about me, but we're dealing with things that are atypical here. We're dealing with disorders. We're dealing with a lot of mental health struggles. And I just wanted to help educate you so that you can be a big support for me. Right? There are nice ways to say this. I do have a podcast episode on that you can actually give family members. So it's episode 50, so going way back, and it's called Explaining OCD to People Who Don't Get It, Helping Siblings, Family, and Friends Understand OCD. I actually have another one on anxiety. That's episode 49, Explaining Anxiety to People Who Don't Get It, Helping Siblings, Family, and Friends. So I say this every time I do my podcast, but if you go to my website at atparentingsurvival.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a search button. You can search just the number 50 or number 49, and that should pop up. I am going to test it actually because there's like a 0 there. I wonder if I just did 49, if that would work. Let's see. Actually, that's interesting. I'm glad I did that. No, it popped up. But you might want to do 049 or 050 because that is actually how it's written. But those might be good podcasts to have a loved one listen to so that they can learn. And what I tried to make that podcast episode is like, I'm actually talking to the people that you're sending it to so that can be helpful. So hopefully that gives you another resource. So educational response is taking the time, taking the energy to provide them with links and resources and you explaining things to them. Maybe have them watch a movie. I'm glad that we're starting to get some really realistic movies about OCD in particular. Anxiety, I feel like people can get on some level, more so than OCD, but have them watch Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. That's a great movie that really shows the intricacies of the mind of someone with OCD, or have them read a book. I feel like a book is a big commitment, but a movie, not as much. Okay, so we've got witty response, educational response. The third one is boundary response. This is mind your own business response. It's like, who are you to tell me what to do response. This is setting a firm boundary. And so it's you deciding that this person is not worth being educated. Maybe you've tried already and it's not worth it, or maybe you can just tell it's not worth educating them, and maybe they're not part of your life enough to educate them, but you feel like a boundary needs to be set because this isn't the first time they've said it. So like that family member who said that one thing to me, they don't normally ever say anything that upsets me. So if that was happening nonstop, that might be a boundary response. I had a friend for a period of time that would make these comments about my parenting. And it was so weird. It was like just bizarre to me that they felt like it was okay to tell me. Like it was weird because it almost like they were not a very close friend. And it was a friendship that kind of like was an old friend. And then Jimmy, my husband, died and then kind of came back into my life, 12 years later or whatever. So it was like a distant friend, but all of a sudden felt like it was okay for them to tell me how to parent. It was really bizarre and it made me really uncomfortable. And so I said, if we're going to continue our friendship, we can't talk about my kids. And I don't want you to go out with my kids. So I think part of it was this friend wanted to always do things with my kids, which I thought was a bit weird. And so it wasn't a guy, so it wasn't like that weird, like that type of red flag necessarily, although you never know with that kind of thing, but not with this particular person. I think it was just like an inappropriate boundary. And so, maybe sometimes you just have to be really, really firm. Like let's say it was your parents. I love you and I want to like hang out with you and spend time with you. But when we talk about my kids, I know you don't mean this, or maybe you don't, maybe you do, but I'm just trying to soften it. I start to get very defensive and it's not helpful for me. And so I don't want you to tell me how to parent. I don't want you to tell me how to do things. Like, let me do my own thing. Because when you do that, all you're doing is adding stress to me. And if you love me, you wouldn't add stress. And I'm telling you that by you doing that, you're adding stress. So if you love me, you would stop. However you speak to the people that you love. But that's how I would say it. To set a firm boundary of, you're not helping me. With this friend, There was a different kind of conversation because it wasn't a relative. It was like, if we're going to continue with this friendship, we can't talk about my kids. And we're not going out with my kids. I'll meet you for coffee. We'll talk about your work. We'll talk about my work. We're not talking about my kids. And I can enjoy someone outside of you talking about my kids. I don't need a friendship that's going to talk about my kids. I have lots of friends where I can talk about my kids with them and they're supportive and that's fine. I didn't say that part. But that person's not my friend anymore because I felt like that boundary got broken again. And I felt like it was not heard. And I felt like, okay, they're not capable of hearing this boundary. And so we can't be friends because I have to have a boundary to respect myself. And that's important because, again, we're talking about that coveted commodity that is our energy. It's very expendable and we don't have a lot of it, or I don't have a lot of it. I'm guessing you don't either. And so I'm not going to willy-nilly expend it with different people that are not respecting my boundaries. So who do you need to set a firm boundary with? And maybe it's your partner. And if that's so, maybe marriage therapy is not a bad idea. Or couples therapy. That's not a bad idea. A lot of times that's the last thing that gets any water. It wilts and it doesn't get any water when our kids have anxiety or OCD. And that should be one of the first things to get watered because if you're not a united front, your kids feel it. And so it might be saying, when I handle his anxiety, I don't want you to Monday night quarterbacking it. I feel like I always try to use that analogy or that saying, that phrase, and I probably shouldn't because I'm saying it wrong. Monday day quarterbacking. Yeah, I Googled it while I'm recording my podcast because that's what I do. Yeah, I feel like my husband used to say that a lot of the times. He'd be like, they're Monday day quarterbacking. I don't even watch football. So what a stupid phrase for me to say. But you know what I'm saying. Like, maybe we say to our partner, it's not helpful when you criticize me after I've had a really long day and I'm trying to deal with his compulsions and I'm doing the best I can. So boundary setting isn't just with strangers or with friends or family. It can be with our partner. It could even be with our kids. Recently, my 20-year-old has come back from college. She comes back in the summer and on breaks. Now that I don't have my husband here and she's like, second in command in her mind, she did not have a problem over this current summer telling me how she would parent differently. She's like, Mom, he shouldn't have all that. Mom, he should be doing this. Mom. And so finally I had to say to her, I appreciate that you're trying to help me, but you are not the parent. It is very exciting that you're now an adult and I get to talk to you in a more adult way, but you don't come in here and you're not the co-parent. And nor do I want you to be, because that's not a fun role to be in. Like, you don't have to have the burden and responsibility of co-parenting your siblings. I'm going to parent in a way that I want to parent, and you can parent in a way that you want to parent when you become a parent. But right now, you're a sibling. And so that's a boundary. And so now whenever she does something that's a little parentified, I'm like, you're not the parent. You're not the parent. So boundary setting could be so many different places. It could be with our siblings, with our other kids. It could be with our partners. But I think the ultimate takeaway that I want you to have from this is ask yourself, there's one more. I'm so sorry. Right? So there's 4. It's actually kind of a trick thing because the 4th response is no response. Some people don't deserve a response at all. It's not worth the energy. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to make a difference. Maybe it's a stranger or a teacher that you're like, is never going to get it. Or maybe it's a relative that you've already set a boundary with and they're breaking the boundary. And maybe you just have to limit your time with that person, short periods of time. And it's not worth giving them a response anymore because been there, done that, and they're not listening, they're not hearing, it's not making a difference. So I did have the 4th response is no response. Notice what I don't have. Do you notice what I don't have? I don't have an angry response because we don't really choose that. That just happens. That just comes through us. It's not a choice typically. And I'm not going to choose an angry response because of the boomerang. I don't want to boomerang anybody. And so sometimes we were like, we don't want to protect or cocoon people who are being cruel or judgy or whatever, but we're not protecting them. We're protecting ourselves and we're protecting our energy that needs to go to our kids. So to recap, we've got the witty response, the educational response, the boundary response, and the no response. Don't give your power and energy away by getting hooked into the conflict by giving an angry response if you can control it, which I know sometimes is hard. And so I would ask yourself, is this a person worth putting my energy into to respond to this? Yes. Is this a person who's going to impact me or my child's life? Yes. Is this a person I can educate? No. Okay, then it's a boundary response. Is this a person I can educate? Yes. Okay, it's an educational response. Is this a person I've tried to educate and set a boundary for over and over and over again? It's a no response then. It's I'm going to limit my response to you. I'm going to limit my contact with you. I'm going to preserve my energy in small increments around you because my kids are more important at this point in time and maybe forever, probably, hopefully. So some things to just think about when you are getting those unhelpful comments or unsolicited advice to support your kids with anxiety or OCD, because it is so hard already and we just don't need unhelpful people in our world. And that doesn't mean we write everybody off. It means that sometimes we commit to sending them resources and really helping educate them. And sometimes it means we really double down with our boundaries. And sometimes it means that we limit our contact. What is it for you? Depends on the person. Maybe depends on what's going on. But I hope that you found this helpful. Don't forget to register for my free series where we will go through this in much more detail and we will process so much more than just this. We talk about your mindset, your triggers when you're showing up for your child's anxiety or OCD, how to anchor yourself so that you can anchor your child. We talk about your mental and your physical health and signs and symptoms to look for before it's too late. So I hope that you'll sign up. It's free. Join us at atparentingsurvivalseries.com, register, and then you will be emailed the videos as they go live. Well, I hope that you found this podcast helpful. Don't forget to hit a star and rate it or write a review. You know I greatly appreciate that. And I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. And I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.